are planning to start sending in your law school applications this fall, my guess is that you are already starting to think about building the list of law schools that you plan to apply to. If that sounds like you, stick around. For those of you that are new, I'm Alice. I'm the Director of Pre-Law Programming here at Barrier Breakers and Montgomery Admissions Consulting, where we specialize in first-generation and minority law school application support. I come to this work with almost a decade of law school admissions experience, and today I'm actually going to be pulling a little bit more on my experience as a consultant, as opposed to the time that I spent as an admissions officer, as I walk through some different factors that you may want to consider as you begin building your law school list. So there are two major types of factors that I want you to consider as you're beginning to build your law school list. The first one are hard factors. We'll go over all of these. They're pretty straightforward. The good news is that they are things that you can find concrete answers to. There's data that backs it up. You can go to a specific website, you can talk to a specific person, and the answer is going to be the same regardless of who is asking the question, regardless of who is answering the question, because there is data to back it up. So the very first thing that I want you to look at as you start building this list, particularly if you have an idea of what your university GPA is, so your undergraduate GPA, and what your LSAT score is. If you haven't taken the LSAT yet, that's fine. There is still time. Don't panic. But take a practice test or a diagnostic. Get a general idea. That's going to be really helpful as you start building out this list, because one of the other things that you want to keep in mind as you start building this list is balance. So back to those hard factors. The very first thing that I want you to look at, and we're not going to stay here long, is the admissions data. I mentioned knowing your GPA and your LSAT. That's where this is going to come in play. I want you to go to Law School Transparency. It's a great website, puts lots of information together about every law school in the country. You can go to the American Bar Association's page. They collect all of this data from each law school every single year, and you can look at all of these statistics there. Or you can even go to the law school website itself. That should have all of this information someplace in a fairly easy to read, easy to find area. And the first thing that you should look at are the GPA, LSAT, medians. Compare those to what you have, just take a peek at them. You may also want to look at acceptance rate, you can look at the size, you can look at the scholarships that have been offered in the past. Those things are really helpful just to have in the back of your mind. It's also going to come into play if you start making those decisions based on finances. If the school is particularly generous, you'll be able to see that. If the school is not particularly generous, you will also be able to see that. The next thing, and this is where we're going to get into a little more detail. I want you to stay here a little bit longer. These are the more important ones. Admissions data is great. More important for what we're doing right now, though, is going to be bar passage information. So I'm assuming a couple of things. If you are watching this video, you want to go to law school. The other thing that I am assuming, and this is a big assumption because I get it as someone who graduated from law school and doesn't practice, you're going to law school because you want to be a lawyer. In order to be a lawyer, you have to pass the bar. There's maybe two different ways around that. But on the whole, unless you are in a very special case, very special circumstance, you gotta pass the bar exam in order to become an attorney. You get barred in the state where you practice. That is the thing that says you are capable of being a good attorney. You know the rules and regulations that govern you, and there are some protections for your clients if you happen to be real bad at it. So, bar passage is very, very important. Schools report this out as well. I always recommend looking at the American Bar Association information for this, but again, law schools will post this information. Now, there are a variety of ways to decide what is a good bar passage rate and what is a bad bar passage rate. The American Bar Association has theirs. Schools have to maintain a certain percentage in order to maintain their accreditation. So they have to do so well to keep the thing that says we can train future attorneys. The thing that is most important that you'll learn from bar passage is how hard you are going to have to work on your own, in addition to what you're doing at law school, to ensure that you pass the bar. Just because the school may not have a super high bar passage rate, if you are super driven, you know you can do this with or without, you are ready to go, you don't need a lot of assistance, that may be less important. I don't love that. Full disclosure, I do not love that. I want you going to a school with a very high bar passage rate. But if you think you can do it on your own, bar passage may become slightly less important. It is still important though. It does not ever come off the important list. Period. Bar passage is important. Schools that typically have high bar passage rates are going to offer a lot of extra support throughout your time in the law school. Whether that is partnering up with commercial bar prep courses, it's offering a bar prep course in your 2 or 3L year. Most of the time it's in your 3L year, and it's gonna go through all of the subjects you're going to need for the bar exam, because a lot of the time you haven't seen those since you were a 1L. And then you'll get back into them in bar prep over the summer if you're planning to take it in July. Schools with slightly lower bar passage rates may not have all of that support for you as a student. So you want to ensure that you are going to a school that matches the support level that you need. Tied pretty closely to bar passage is also going to be the employment numbers. You want to know what the employment outcomes are for a school that you are planning to attend. Because again, making some assumptions, I assume that you would like a job when you graduate. Ideally, a lawyer job, or at least lawyer adjacent. That's where I live. That's where I have lived my entire career. I really love it here. But still had to graduate, still had to get a job. You want to see that the graduates from the school you plan to attend are finding jobs. Now, there are a couple of different ways that the employment data can be broken down, and I want you to pay attention to two particular things very, very closely. The first one is the overall employment numbers. That is almost always the number of students that have a full-time long-term position. You'll notice I just said full-time long-term. Didn't say anything about lawyering. Those jobs can encompass literally anything as long as it is full-time and long-term. It can be whatever. The good news is that most places are going to give you a breakdown a little bit further, a little bit more detailed. You're going to see the full-time legal jobs. You're going to see the long-term full-time lawyer adjacent jobs. So again, JD Advantage is what they are typically called in the listing of all of this. So look for those JD Advantage if you want to do something that is lawyer adjacent. You maybe don't need to practice, you don't need your license, something along those lines, but you still use your law degree with the things that you learned in law school. There are part-time long-term, part-time short-term, full-time short-term. All of these things are broken out and you can look at all of them. But what I want you to pay particular attention to is that overall ranking and then the full-time long-term legal positions. Because again, you're going to law school ideally to become a lawyer, and lawyers are going to fall into that category. If you end up looking at a school who has a great employment overall number, they're 93%, 97% of their graduates are employed 10 months after graduation in full-time long-term positions. Cool. Love that. When you dig down and you see only 70% of that 93 are full-time long-term legal positions, that gives me a little bit of pause. But again, that's going to depend on what it is that you want to do. But those numbers exist and you should pay very, very, very close attention to them. Before we move on, I'm going to do a really quick reminder. Bar passage, employment outcomes. You will notice, and you will find by the end of this, that I don't talk about the rankings for law schools at all. Rankings are fine, but they are very often tied to things other than outcomes. And as a student choosing a law school, the outcomes should be very important to you. So moving on. The very last thing that I want to talk about in hard factors are programs. I know this sounds weird, but stay with me. If you know exactly what it is you want to do when you graduate law school, you are not like me who was figuring it out along the way basically throughout my educational career. Worked out fine, both ways work, but if you know exactly where you want to be, you want to look for schools that specialize in that particular field. They're out there, more than likely, unless you've picked a super, super brand new, super, super niche field. And even then, some school's gonna have a program for it. So find that school. If you are particularly interested in becoming a litigator, you want to look for a school that has programs that give you experience litigating. It is sometimes hard to find that as far as getting actually into court representing real clients, particularly in your early years of law school. However, in this case, you want to look for a school that has a good trial competition program. If you are interested in maybe not necessarily litigation, but you want to work on appellate level work, look for some place that has a moot court team. Most law schools field at least one or two of these, and you will be able to find out that information on their website somewhere. But take a look at those things if that is something that is important to you. If that is an experience that matters, make sure you're adding schools to your list that give you the opportunity to do those things. The next one is law review. Law review is a great opportunity. It's going to give you a chance to write a lot. It's going to give you your first crack at editing somebody else's work, most often not your own. You'll be doing that for a long time, don't worry. And it's really, really wonderful on a resume, particularly if you're looking to go into a big law firm. They love to see that you have been part of the editorial staff for a law review. They love to see that you've done things like moot court or trial team. They love to see all of that, and you get very valuable experience doing those things. So if that's something that's important to you, and it's something that you anticipate wanting to do after law school, and these programs are going to help you get there, make sure you're looking for law schools that have them. The last thing is probably the most experiential thing that you can do in law school, save actually during your summer associateships, and this is clinical programs. Clinical programs give you the opportunity to represent real clients, help them with real problems. You effectively act like a real lawyer, but you've got a supervisor. You've got somebody there that's going to be your safety net. Many, many law schools have specialized clinics. If you know what it is that you want to do, and let's say that is child and family work, you want to be a children's advocate, or something along those lines. You are going to look for schools that have a dedicated child and family clinic. Many schools have this. This is a very popular one. It's a pretty large field as far as legal professions go. So you'll have a lot of things to choose from. If you are looking for a slightly more niche space, you want to do admiralty or maritime or something like that, you may need to look a little deeper to see if there's a school that happens to ideally be near the ocean that has a clinic dedicated to those types of things. If you're interested in intellectual property, whether that is patent work, copyright work, or whatever, finding a law school that has a clinic that's dedicated to intellectual property work is going to give you a ton of great experience. And the reason that I put this in hard factors instead of soft is because this data exists. Schools are going to put out there that these are the things that we offer. These are the things that you can do as a student in our law school. That's not going to change. If it is super important to you, it may not be super important to somebody else, but that doesn't mean it's going to be any different at the school level. So take the time, look through the school's websites. That's a great place to find all of this. It is to their benefit to make sure that you can find this stuff easily, because that is how they draw students to their school. You need to take the time to do this research. I talked a little bit about the rankings earlier. If you are building your list based solely on the US News and World Rankings, please consider doing something else. You can start there if you really want to, but I want you to do the research on all of the schools that you put on your list of applications. It may be that you are still applying to the T14. That's totally fine. I'm not going to tell you not to do that. But the rankings do not tie directly to outcomes. They do not tie directly to the experiential opportunities you will have in law school, and that's what you're there for. The name recognition is great, don't get me wrong, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, but make sure that you're not just putting a school on your list because of the name and nothing else. You will find yourself in a better fitted law school, you will likely be happier, and you may even be able to pay a little less. Unclear, that's going to be up to you on the long term, but make sure that you are doing this research, that you are building out the reasons for choosing law schools that you apply to, and they're basing it on more than just a ranking. Okay, ranking soapbox done. Soft factors. These are a little different. They're going to be a little harder to nail down concretely. They're going to change person to person. The value of them is going to change person to person. I know that there was some of that in the hard factors, but still, these are much squishier, for lack of a better way to describe them. They don't quantify quite as well as things like, this is the program that I have, this is the admissions data, this is what our employment numbers are. These are a little squishier, and we're going to lead right out of the gate of what I was just talking about, and that is name recognition. There are two major types of law schools. There are regional law schools, and there are national law schools. One is not inherently better than the other. I cannot stress that enough. Regional law schools are not inherently better than national law schools, and national law schools are not inherently better than regional schools. It is going to depend entirely on what it is you want to get out of your law school. If you are going to a national law school, and this is where the rankings tend to come in, they have that name recognition, it's the Harvards, it's the Yales, it's the Stanford. You hear the name, you have a pretty good idea of what's happening there. And that's fine. Go to a national law school. You will get a very good education there. If, on the other hand, you have grown up in a family of attorneys, they have a practice that is on Main Street in your hometown, and you want to come back, you want to take that practice over from them as they retire, and that is what you're going to do, you may not necessarily need to go to a national law school. Chances are you're not going to be involved in super mega weird litigation. You're not going to be dealing with major corporations. You're going to be doing estates. You're going to be doing family law. You're going to be doing cases for the folks that live near you. You will be best served as you start your legal education to learn the things that are important in the place that you are. You want the local rules. You want to know what is happening at the state level, at the local level, for where you are. A regional law school is going to be able to do that so much better than a national law school. Again, both of them are great. It is just entirely dependent on what it is that you want to do. You can talk to any student, most any student, that has ever gone to a national law school and then happened to do a summer position at home. If home has a regional law school, chances are the bulk of the people that you'll be working with during that summer position as you come back from your national law school are going to be locals. They're going to have gone to that regional law school, and they may know a lot more people than you do. They may have a better handle on what it is that they are doing, what it is that you are being asked to do as a summer associate than you do. Does not mean their education was better, it just fits this space more. So if you want to work in a small firm, if you want to work in a regional law firm, if you know that you want to be in this area of the world, you have no plans to do gigantic international M&A work. If you do, awesome, Godspeed. You don't need to go to a national law school. You still can. Again, you're going to get a good education regardless. It's just whether or not it's going to be immediately and completely relevant to what it is that you're doing as soon as you finish law school. Next, you're going to want to look at the community of the law school that you are planning to attend, the communities of the law schools that you are choosing to apply to. Law school applications take time and energy. You want to make sure that you are doing this and trying to get to a place where you will be happy. I can tell you with absolute certainty, you will be spending a lot of time with your classmates, period. They are very hard to avoid, whether you like it or not. As soon as you start law school, these are the people that you are going to be spending the bulk of your time with. If you are a very laid back, very non-competitive, I'm here for the journey, I don't care if I win, and you don't look at this and end up at a law school that is hyper competitive, you will likely be unhappy. It's just not a good fit for you. If you are hyper competitive, you thrive in that environment where it's like, going all the time, I'm gonna do better than you, I'm gonna be the best that I absolutely can be, and there's not a ton of super close connection amongst the students. That's fine, that may be exactly what you're after, but you need to check, because if you end up at a very non-competitive community feel school and you are hyper competitive, you will be unhappy, and chances are you may come off like a jerk. I don't know, maybe. If you are super chill and super laid back and don't really worry with the competitive nature of law school, and you're there to learn, have a good time, figure it all out, and you end up in a school that is hyper competitive, you are going to be unhappy. So you need to check these things. Are you coming from a place where you are used to having ready access to your faculty members? This was me. So I came from a small school. My faculty all knew who I was by the time I was a senior. There were several that I had every single year. They had students over for dinner at their homes. They knew what was going on outside of class just because that was the nature of the college I went to. We could do that. A lot of my classes were small, so the professors had the time and the effort, and they put in the effort to get to know their students. I am lucky my law school was very similar, so I didn't have to adjust to having ready access to my professors, having professors that were personally invested in what my life was doing, what I was doing academically, how I was, to a law school where professors are very much, I'm here to teach you, I will answer your questions, but outside of my classroom, nah. If that is a thing that you are looking for, find out how the professors interact with the students. Again, if you are used to having ready access and all of a sudden you get an email and as soon as they are finished with class they go back to their office and they are not having open office hours, that's fine. But if you were expecting ready access and you don't get it, you will be unhappy. If you don't care one way or another, cool. This is less important for you to check. It also may be worthwhile to check anyway if you were not used to professors who are like, hey, so I noticed that you weren't in class for a day or two. You okay? Is everything all right? My faculty did that. And I know lots of folks that came from schools that were not used to that were very confused the first couple of times it happened. And they're like, am I in trouble? You're not in trouble. Just wanted to see how you were. Check it in. That is what I was used to. So I was not shocked if I was out sick for a week or I missed 2 classes or something along those lines. If I didn't communicate with my faculty, they came to find me. That was normal for me. It is not normal for every student, and that's okay. Again, it is what you are used to, what you are expecting. Are you looking for a law school that really plugs into the place where it is? Super involved in community organizations, super involved in philanthropic things, whatever it is, see what the community is like. Make sure it's a place that you fit well in. Again, if you are trying to squeeze yourself into a community where you do not fit, you will likely be unhappy. And the reason I talk about this unhappiness and the reason that I bring this up is because if you are unhappy generally, your academics will often suffer. Law school is hard enough when you are happy and feeling good. Do not make it harder. Find a place that meshes with the way that you learn, that meshes with the way that you want to be, that meshes with the place that you want to live. Okay? The last thing, and much like our hard factors, this one's gonna sound weird, but stay with me. The last soft factor to consider is location. I know law schools aren't like getting up and moving around. That's not a thing that happens. The buildings are where the buildings are. It is going to show up on maps the exact same way every time you look, or if it changes, there's some notice. They're not just like wandering about. But you need to pay attention to where your law school is. And the reason that I put it in soft factors instead of hard is because the things that are going to determine what's important as far as location goes are going to vary student to student. They're going to vary with what it is you're interested in pursuing as your career. It's going to vary with what you feel comfortable in. I know at this point in time in my life, I don't love a giant city. I would be unhappy if I lived full-time in New York City. I love visiting New York, don't get me wrong. But if this were me before I had gone to law school and I was looking at my options and I hadn't figured this out yet, I hadn't taken the time to explore what type of area I liked living in and I felt most comfortable in, and I applied to NYU or Columbia and I got in and I just went, I would be realizing very quickly that is not a good fit for me. Again, I love visiting giant cities. I think they are so much fun to explore. I don't want to live in one. That's not me. I don't want to live in the middle of nowhere, but like 500,000 metro area, that's perfect. Or a 70,000 person city. Beautiful. Love that. Not several million in a very tiny island. Figure out what feels good for you. Figure out where you feel most comfortable and take that into consideration as you start building out your law school list. The next thing I touched on them really briefly in an example earlier, maritime or admiralty. Those deal with water. If that is something that you are interested in practicing, I would very strongly recommend that you do not go to law school in the middle of the United States, where there are not major bodies of water. You're probably going to want to go to a coastal school, because that is where those types of law exist. That is always going to change, depending on what is important to you, depending on what it is you want to practice, depending on whether or not you even know what it is you want to practice. There are schools out there that have devoted tons of resources to particularly niche areas. They have become the law school for this type of law. Definitely put a school like that on your list. If you are more like me, figuring it out as you go along, maybe don't lean towards a school that has put all of its resources behind one particular area. Go to a place that's a little more general. Take a look at all of those pieces as you are starting to build this list. So I've given you a lot of different things to consider. We're going to run it back very quickly. So you know, hard factors. We're going to look at admissions data. We're going to look at bar passage. We're going to look at employment outcomes, and we're going to look at programs. What does the school have to offer you? What kind of support is it going to give you as you prepare to take the bar exam? What type of employment are its graduates getting? Then we're going to look at soft factors. Is it a regional or a national school? Which one of those do you need for what your career has in store, or what you hope that your career has in store? Are you hyper competitive? Are you super chill? What is the community at the law schools you are interested in like? I don't think I told you this before. If that's something that you're looking into as you were trying to figure out that like community vibe, talk to current students. They should be around at virtual events, at regular open houses, or just reach out to the admissions office and ask if you can talk to a student. They will let you talk to them, I promise. And some of the time, students are nice. Don't talk to them during finals though, just bad for everybody. So, community vibe. Does it mesh with what your vibe is? And finally, location. Are you moving to a place where you will be happy? Are you moving to a place where it makes sense given what it is you want to do? These are just a couple of factors to build your initial list. This is not taking into consideration tons of financial aid. This is not taking into consideration what your final academic metrics are going to be. This is not taking things into consideration like what it is generally that you want to practice. If you want to do public interest work, don't go to a school that's really, really good at turning out corporate attorneys. If you want to do corporate work, don't go to a school that's really good at turning out public interest attorneys, okay? All of this stuff is going to go into you building this list. If this was helpful, like and subscribe. If you have a friend that is starting this process and you think this could be helpful to them, please share it. And with that, I'll see y'all soon.